It's always nice to see people you knew as young whippersnappers become, all suited, booted types. It is very nice to see that. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here, really, because of the Social Observatory has been involved in livelihoods projects, had its genesis with livelihoods projects, and particularly with the NRLM back in 2009 and then 2011. And what we were trying to do with the Social Observatory was have a different style of evidence-based research with development, what I have in a recent paper called reflexive or reflective development. Yeah? I'll be circulating this presentation. All the citations are there if you're interested to read more about these issues. But what is reflexive development? It's the idea of research as somebody flying in, doing a survey, flying back out, sitting in a fancy office somewhere in the middle of Washington, D.C., and analyzing the data and then reporting to you like the great God from up above what your impact is to me, we need to go beyond that. Yeah? Research and implementation, and particularly the citizens who we are trying to work with, have to be in a constant process of dialogue. And that process of dialogue has to not just focus on the outcomes at the end, which are sometimes, have their own issues around it. You read, there's an recent issue in World Development on what RCTs actually do and how they work and whether they not work. And I urge you to read that. You'll see there are lots of issues with how we measure causality and how we measure outcomes and how much we should rely on these things. But what we do not do at all very well is to understand how we reach that outcome. What were the various steps taken step by step, process by process, to reach that outcome? So a dialogic process of evidence-based decision-making in development will focus as much on processes as on outcomes. Now, that not only means working with project implementers or implementers on the ground, it also means working with the citizens, giving them spaces to have dialogue, giving them a chance to do research on themselves. Why should you be paying somebody like me thousands of dollars to do an evaluation when the citizens themselves, we now have the technology, as I'll show you, to let them do their own research? Let us kick me out of business. That is the purpose of the Social Observatory, to throw me out of business. Yeah? So, how do we bring this idea of bottom-up development that we all work on into research itself? That's what I call reflexive or reflective development. Yeah? Now, how do we do this? It cannot happen simply from bottom up. It needs a conversation from the top and the bottom, as we all know. Yeah? When we're doing NRLM just can't happen if you just let women's groups do what they do. They need facilitation support. Similarly, research of this kind needs a sandwich between the top and the bottom. And also, please understand that things don't happen quickly. They take time. This is not something that you can just quickly want results. I want quick results. It doesn't happen like that. Everything that we've seen in the last 2 days has shown you how much time this takes, how much effort, how much thoughtful attention to detail, how much thoughtful attention to process. Please listen to the project implementers who've been on the stage here. The real people are doing the real work, not people like me. Yeah? Listen to how, and all of you are involved in that space, how much attention to detail it requires. A lot of it is thankless work. I spent a lot of time with Jivaka particularly and with Puduvalva in Tamil Nadu. I've had, these have been some of the most satisfying experiences of my life, not because of the researchers I worked with, which have all been great friends, but because of the people on the ground. Yeah? Now, this is slow development. It's sort of like this whole new concept of slow cooking. Yeah? We don't want to go to McDonald's. We don't want to McDonaldize development. We want to make development something that like those, जैसे पुराने ज़माने में दाल बनाते थे ना 2 दिन के लिए, ऐसे होना चाहिए. Okay? Now, what is reflexive development in practice? What did the Social Observatory try to do and try to leave behind as a legacy? 3 aspects, all interrelated. One is long-term feedback, and that is an impact evaluation. So impact evaluations are central. You've heard a lot about that. That is necessary, but it is not sufficient. Everyday feedback. Project implementers, even VOs, need constant feedback as to what is happening on the ground. That means you have to pay absolute attention to MI systems, decision support systems, and support and process monitoring. I'm afraid that with all the talk about this, it is not done well, still not done well. We worked for 6 years with Jivaka to get it to a point where it was actually working, and I think there's still room to go, and Jivaka is the best. Yeah? I remember with Puduvalbu when we were working, and I'm happy to say this in public, and another famous project, probably the most famous of all the rural livelihoods projects in India, the front end was beautiful. You know, the app was beautiful. पीछे का जो data था was complete nonsense, made up. You all know this. Yeah? This has to be stopped. I mean, you can have beautiful, get your best IT people to design the front end. What about the back end? What about the quality of the data? If the data is no good, nobody's going to look at the app. That has to be fixed. Thirdly, citizen beneficiary and feedback systems. Empowering things like the Gram Sabha, empowering things like the VO meetings, so that citizens have a voice in how they function and giving them the resources to make better decisions by democratizing data, giving them control over their own data. I'll show you an example of that. So we did a number of different things, and a lot of them have been very nicely summarized by the World Bank team outside in pamphlets. So please look at that. I will not be able to talk about the various 30, 35 things we've done. I'll really focus on 2 with a brief glimpse of 2 others, okay? One from Bihar, one from Tamil Nadu. Now, I should also say a little bit about the Social Observatory itself. This has been a tremendous collaboration with NRLP, starting with Vijay Kumar, even though he and I have had very, very big arguments, and with Jivaka and with Puduvalbu in particular, but also with Tripti in Odisha. We've been very grateful for funding from Safansi. Several people in Bihar were involved. I'd like to highlight 3, Arvind Chaudhary himself, Ajit Ranjan, our M&E counterpart, and of course, the late and great Archana Tiwari-ji, who was, I'm very sorry to say, is no longer with us. And in Tamil Nadu, S. Krishnan from the IAS, and one of my favorite people, Tisha Jivina, who was the assistant project director of Puduvalbu, but really did all the work. Okay? And of course, in the World Bank, and this is an alphabetical order, so nobody gets upset, there are a lot of key partners, okay, who helped us in this process. So we worked in Bihar actually from 2011 to 2017, Tamil Nadu 2011 2017, and also in Odisha with the wonderful D.V. Swamiji, and in Maharashtra a little bit as well. Okay. Now the SO team again was a large team. Those of you who know the SO know all these people. They've all, I'm very proud to say, every one of them has gone on to bigger and better things. Our research partners continue to be research partners. I continue to work with many of them. Okay. Now, let's start with Bihar, and picking up in the last session, I'm not going to throw at you a bunch of numbers because you've seen enough of that, okay? I'm going to focus on a why question or a how question. How did Jivaka, particularly in phase 1 of Jivaka, those of you who saw phase 1 of Jivaka, I mean, it was an extraordinary experience to see this state, this place which was so devastatingly poor, so devastatingly unequal to women, badly governed for so many decades, suddenly begin a transformation. How did that happen? Yeah? And, you know, Upamanyu Datta, who was working for me at that time, did a quick evaluation using propensity score matching methods. It had its problems, but it was one of the first evaluations of this kind done in the country. And that evaluation found in Jivaka's phase 1 tremendous impact, not just on economic outcomes, but also on empowerment of women. Tremendous impact. Yeah? So big that people didn't believe it. Of course, Jivaka loved us for it. But this was not something cooked up. This was what the data said. Okay? Now, the question then is, we saw this and we said, okay, this is an imperfect impact evaluation method. By the way, it's very similar to the methods that were presented yesterday, so I should not say it's imperfect. All methods are imperfect. It's a propensity score matching method. The question is, how did this happen? And do we believe these data? Right? So there were 2 questions we had. How did this happen? Do we believe this data? So we set up basically a very, what we call long durée. Over a long period of time, we want to do very, very careful ethnographic work to understand how this change happened. So we conducted, in a subset of the quantitative sample, an in-depth qualitative analysis. So what we did here, so the idea was to use, not just do sort of random qualitative work, but to design it in such a way that we could tease out some causal impact. And of course, qualitative work, the disadvantage is you can't do it at large scale because it's such in-depth work, you have to do it in very, very small scale. So we collected 2 villages from phase 1, matched them on the basis of quantitative data and qualitative observation with 2 villages from phase 2 of Jivaka, which hadn't started yet. Okay? And then with 2 villages, we call pure controls that actually came in phase 3. Okay? So we're comparing phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. At this point, only phase 1 has been finished. So in phase 1, we're going back in time with our respondents. Phase 2, we are starting from the beginning and tracking forward. Phase 3, we don't even look at here because it came after we left. Okay? Now, there were 12 cycles of data collected over a period of 4 years by a dedicated team led by the wonderful Tripti Majumdar. Okay? Every 3 months, 5 ethnographers would visit villages for at least a week. Yeah? And they were made clear to them that they were independent of the project, and they were told they were independent of the project. Yeah? We looked at different types of people: joiners, SHG non-joiners, their husbands, key stakeholders in the village, the mukhya, the sarpanch, people like that, money lenders, landlords. Jivaka staff were also interviewed at great depth. And it was a lot of participant observation that also went on. So we were actually watching what happened, not just talking. Yeah? And because we were doing this over a 4-year period, you were able to track change in a very slow way, watching that dal being cooked. There's somebody watching the pot as it's bubbling. That is the equivalent of what was going on here. I like the slow cooking analogy. What did we find? In the control villages, life was the same. I mean, it very much goes back to, if you read Social Anthropology of India, all the work done at Delhi School over decades. It was very much like that. Caste boundaries were rigid. They were what I've called constraining preferences. That is, you were so set up within that hierarchical structure that you believed that all the oppression you suffered was great. Basically, it was what you wanted. It was how God had intended that for you. And the modus operandi for mobility was old-fashioned Srinivas-style Sanskritization. You were trying to adopt the practices of the upper caste, and that's how you moved forward. Okay? In the public sphere, that was the private sphere. In the public sphere, all the dominant positions were held by dominant castes. Even in villages with reservations for lower castes, the dominant caste continued to call the shots in the village via the traditional panchayat system. The only tweak of change that was happening at that time, this was in 2011, was migration. People coming in from Delhi or Calcutta, coming in back into the village and bringing in different aspirations, different preferences. And that made a small dent. Now, on gendered practices in controlled villages, as you would expect, household decision-making was completely controlled by women. And importantly in Bihar, and I'm not saying anything here that people in Bihar don't know, tremendous control over women's mobility. Yeah? And the ability to move freely for women was, if they moved freely, it was seen as a symptom of male deficiency. So their husbands were chastised that the women were able to do things freely. And particularly money lending and so on, anything to do with the credit market. There was a massive credit market failure in these villages, and the credit sphere was completely masculine. And women from upper caste particularly were not allowed to move at all. Tremendous restrictions, parda and so on. So what did Jivaka do in phase 1? Led by Arvind Chaudhary, led by Parmesha from the bank and their teams, doing such a tremendous job. So the first thing they did was a thorough power analysis of the village, informal village gathering, looking at caste dynamics, land use patterns, informal money lending, all the things, what makes this village tick or not tick, yeah, everything. And then they slowly got buy-in from the village elders through this process. In that process of trying to understand the village, they were talking to the elders as well, to the husbands, and they were saying, look, we're coming here to give you cheap credit, and because and they'll tell you, Manoj is here, no? Manoj, yahan pe hai na? Somewhere here? Right, I thought so. Okay, so talk to the Jivaka people. They will tell you credit for them was not the goal in those days. Credit for them was a bribe to allow women to come into that, to come into the groups. Yeah? And they were constantly in ongoing conversation with elites in the village. So it wasn't like we were going to fight people in the village, no. We were going to incorporate them into the process. And then they did, social mapping to identify key people in the village who could be the first movers. That was very, very central. Yeah? So women themselves from the village, Didis, turned into the eyes and ears of the community and helped mobilize the community. And you got to understand, we are now, many, many years later, Bihar, because of Jivaka, is not like this anymore. I mean, having been visiting these villages even from before that, from 2009, the kind of change this represented was something totally tremendous. Yeah? Second, mobilization of women. And what is very, very central here is this old chestnut of a word, co-production. Jivaka in phase 1 was all about co-production with a discourse that's cutting across caste. So how are they doing that? They were telling women, your jat doesn't matter, your dharm doesn't matter. What matters is that you're all poor. That's the thing that binds you together. Yeah? And so that helped them talk about their own narratives of poverty, their narratives of suffering as women, and they found those groups to be very safe spaces where they could discuss these things openly without feeling that somebody's watching and somebody's going to beat them up. And if you've done any surveys in India, which I'm sure many of you have, you always know people always watching when you're conducting the interview. When I visited Jivaka later, as things went on, that stopped. The men respected that space. Wo to Jivaka ka kaam hai, chalne do. Nobody was interfering and watching. Okay? The idea was to make self-help and self-reliance the end goal rather than jobs or cheap credit. So these outcomes are looking for jobs and credit, of course. Remember, they are a consequence of all of this. They don't come by magic. Yeah? And the targeting of households was done through participatory identification of the poor, which all of you know very well. Okay? The third one was the having new rituals for these women. You know, they were subject to the old familial traditional religious rituals of various kinds, all the festivals that didn't go away, but they were new rituals. Getting a passbook, getting a money box that you operate, teaching them how to calculate and do counting tasks. These were, and doing the Panchasutra recitation all the time. Why is that important? Because it is giving you a new sense of identity. It's giving you a new sense of ritualization. This is like doing a puja, you see? So this helped these women come together and head-on deal with issues of elite capture and the messy politics within the SHG. And it was happening because it is reiterated. All the time you're doing this again and again. Ritual songs, theater, flip charts. You saw some of the presentations, particularly Kudambashri, talking about these things. Why are these important? Because they are empowering rituals. The idea of iterative rituals is central here. Yeah? And with that, you start making claims. You start saying, okay, the PDA shop I can visit. Not just visit, I will start taking it over. I will start going to the bank. I will start dealing differently in how I deal with my husband. The husband starts looking at the woman with a new sense of respect. Yeah? All that slowly changes. Jivaka becomes a way of life. It is not an intervention anymore. I mean, I've met women in Delhi from Bihar, or Jharkhand for that matter, who know the interventions in those places. हाँ, हमारे गाँव में तो होता है, वो तो this becomes a routine aspect of their lives. It becomes a new way of life. So there's a very lovely quote from our so Nitish has turned women into men. Okay? And it is said by both sides, by women's self-help group members with great pride and with great regret by the elites. Okay? Happens both sides. But the point is, you're giving, because of political clout, and remember, what is central here is if Jivaka did not have the support of the chief minister, which by the way came later, didn't come in the early phases, the intervention people would not have had the kind of clout that they had in the village. They are Nitish's people. They are more powerful than the Mukhya. Yeah? So that's important. That's the idea of the sandwich. You're giving women exclusive access to a set of physical resources, symbolic resources, social capital, and an institutional environment that was to that point perceived as being masculine. The women are getting their own sources of capital, of soft capital. And slowly the norms change over a relatively short period of time because of this reiterative process of the collective violation of behavioral injunctions. What do I mean by that? When the women start behaving differently, in the beginning there's a bit of thing, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's like you're drowning a frog in a boiling pot of water. If you want that analogy, you don't even notice that the frog is getting boiled, you see? That's what's happening to the elites. These women are getting stronger and stronger in front of their eyes because it's taking 2-3 years. They don't even notice. It's like watching a flower bloom. You don't even see it. Suddenly, things are different. And you're done. And then you have Jivaka women from phase 1 leading India in how they are changing gender norms around the country. It's a slow process. Right. Then we did an RCT of phase 2. A 2-year RCT. That's the first randomized control trial done of livelihoods interventions. And we did this after with a 2-year window. Yeah? So it wasn't a very long intervention, and the results were not as good. There was no women's empowerment. There was some credit relaxation. People were refinancing with cheaper loans. So we then continued over that 4-year period to ask, why is this phase 2 not working as well as phase 1? And that's the second paper that we call On the Front Lines of Scaling Up. And the key difference was in that scaling up process, the idea that facilitators would do slow cooking had disappeared. There was tremendous pressure from the top to push this forward very, very quickly, which means that all the careful work that was done in phase one, you didn't have the time for, you didn't have the people for. So, and the point is that you can't do it, because that's, as you scale up, what is it now, Param, how many? 10 million women, you cannot do that careful work. So you need to substitute that careful listening with systems, with MI systems, dashboards that everybody can work with, emphasis on process monitoring. You need to have these adaptive systems in place, which Jivaka did not have at that time. But to Jivaka's credit, and to Arvind Chaudhry's credit, particularly, our negative report was taken seriously, and they took corrective actions. Now, we have not yet seen the new Jivaka evaluation. I'm looking forward to that. That wasn't presented yesterday, but we'll see what happened, whether those correctives worked. So this is the process of dialogue I'm talking about. Don't treat researchers as judges, as the Supreme Court. We're not going to throw you in jail. We are in a process of dialogue. We're showing you your mirror. Look at I'm talking about the implementers. Look at your mirror and shift, change strategy. Researchers also, bhai saab, you're not smarter than anybody else. I'm not smarter than anybody else. Don't be smart, be relevant. Don't come there and say, now I got my PhD, falana. You're not any of those things. You're a regular person who has different skills. Use those skills to the purpose of having a dialogue with the project implementers. That's when change happens, okay? So that's the story of Jivaka. Let me talk very quickly about two other things we did. RISA with D.V. Swami, we sort of had a very, what I would call an unfortunate opportunity. We were doing an evaluation of the Jivaka Tripti livelihoods project. We'd done the baseline using a regression discontinuity design, and then Hurricane Phelan hit in 2013, Hurricane Phelan hit, which you might have heard of, okay? Samik is here because he was very involved in that too. He was the TTL of that project, yeah? Hurricane Phelan hit, and interestingly, from a researcher's point of view, it didn't hit in a specific way. It hit in a random way in our sample. People were affected by it randomly. So then now we can see whether the SAG mobilization, how it is affecting the community's ability to recover from Phelan. So we did a follow-up survey in 2014, approximately 1 year after Phelan hit, and we found that in those Tripti villages, SAGs, that intervention of Tripti, increased non-food expenditures of households affected by Phelan. There was quicker recovery of credit. There was more participation in Gram Sabhas, increasing awareness of those things. In other words, we don't have sort of groundbreaking evidence, but we have a lot of suggested evidence to show that SAGs provide resilience to climate change adaptation, something that we've all been thinking about. We have evidence to show you on this. And trust me, I'm not sitting there trying to make stories up. That's not my game. It's, in fact, known as somebody, everybody thinks of me as some sort of critic of these things. But over the years, I've come to appreciate what SAGs can do. Yeah, they have to be centrally seen as we go through this tremendous nightmare of climate disasters that are going to befall us over the next 20 years. We have to mobilize communities, and SAGs are an important way of doing that. Okay? The second one, in Tamil Nadu, we were trying to look at the links between SAG participation and Gram Sabhas. So we did two things. We recorded 100 Gram Sabhas in 2014 again, and we transcribed them. Yeah? And then 50 of those Gram Sabhas were treatment, 50 were control, where Paduval existed. Samik was again the TTL of that project, so I'm glad you're here, Samik. And we were able to compare treatment and control Gram Sabhas. But firstly, what is interesting is that in just the control Gram Sabhas, we found something. So what happens with this? We did some innovative work, which is we didn't study these transcripts by hand. We used machine learning. We used text-based data analysis. So you use computers to understand those transcripts. And we found, to our surprise, that there was tremendous citizen participation in Gram Sabhas. I mean, the Gram Sabhas are tremendous things. They should not be neglected because they have great value in, again, the collectivization. And what we found when there were women presidents which are randomly assigned, as you know, in those villages, women were much more likely to be heard. Now, what happened when Puduvalva came in the treatment areas of Gram Sabhas was also very interesting. Puduvalva essentially took over the Gram Sabha. It took over the Gram Sabha, which is tremendous for Puduvalva. It became another VO meeting. Yeah? But then what about the roads, the village roads, the other issues of the village? Those got crowded out. So there was both a positive and a negative effect. And these are two different papers that you can see if you're interested. Okay, I just said that very, very briefly because people might be interested. But I want to go to second thing, which I'm actually very proud of that we did with Puduvalva. which is the idea of democratizing data. And I think, I just wish that some more people will pick this up because I think it is tremendous tool. This is the idea of putting me out of business. Let's give communities the ability to design, collect, and analyze their own survey data. Why should we hire expensive researchers to do this task who write papers like mine that nobody in the community reads, leave alone in the project? Why can't you guys just analyze your own data, project people? Why can't, that's your MIS data, why can't communities analyze their own data? That is P-tracking. And what is P-tracking? This is Jivana's coinage. P-tracking is three things. P-tracking, participatory tracking, and she said Puduvalva tracking. Okay, so it's three things. Yeah, so that's where P-tracking comes from. All right. So the idea of P-tracking was to modernize the PRA, which you might have known, using new technology and methods. It's a census, in this case of 200 villages, that is conducted by the communities themselves. It was a pilot of, in this case, 42,000 women. Now, the government of Tamil Nadu asked us to extend it. The bank didn't support that, so we couldn't do it. Government of Karnataka has now requested it, and I hope to do that directly with them. What is interesting is it is now being done in Kenya, all over the country, and I am involved in a project to do it all over Indonesia. My own damn country doesn't seem to want to pick it up. So here I am selling it to you. Please pick it up. What is the idea here? 3 steps. Step 1, development of questionnaires. That questionnaire is not developed by me sitting in some Taj Mahal room. It is developed by community members themselves to track their own well-being. How do they define well-being? How do they do it? And we did this via a process of participation. I'm happy to extend that, talk about that if there's time for discussion. The only instruction we gave the community members was that the questionnaire should be not any more than 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Because otherwise people will be bored. They won't answer your question. And they were all Didis, or the Tamil Nadu equivalent, who were developing this in smaller meetings. What makes their questionnaire different? There's only a 17, by the way, they didn't look at the NSS, they didn't pull down a questionnaire from something we had done, nothing. They developed their own questionnaire. Only 17% overlap with the NSS, with their questions, okay? Covering a range of themes, well-being, livelihoods, economic welfare, domestic violence, but a very different emphasis on framing and emphasis, very different. So I don't know if you can see that. In a standard questionnaire, we'll ask them, how much did you purchase in one vegetables last week or in a month? This is their question on hunger. Their question: does the person who eats last in the family get enough to eat that day? What a brilliant, 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 simple question. We all know what it means. Does the person who eats last in the family get enough to eat? We ask a standard question and all the question, what is the age at the time of marriage? No. Was your decision taken into account at the time of marriage? Did you marry your relative? As you know, in Tamil Nadu, there's a lot of inter-relative marriage. They ask that question. We ask a question on women's empowerment. These are questions, by the way, I developed in 1995, so they're attacking my own questions. Who makes decisions on assets and loans in your family, that kind of thing? No. Do you decide on what clothes to wear based on your preferences? Have there been an instance of domestic violence in your family? Yeah? Digital participation. This was 2014, remember, that this question was developed, and it was still a rather primitive world in technology-wise. Can you use a mobile phone on your own? Can you send and receive text messages? Very, very important questions for these communities, right? Second step, data collection. We are not hiring some fancy survey firm that has an international reputation. We are getting the Didis to do the data collection themselves via a process of video-based decentralized training. And those videos are available, they're all available. Yeah? It is managed by CBO members and Puduvalva project staff. All we did was to develop a tablet-based application, what we call a CAPI application, that was extremely simple, using green and red. Yes, no, or multiple choice. Yeah? With all the steps and the various trees that you have in a standard questionnaire, all very well integrated. Cross-checks done within the app itself, so you can never make a mistake. Yeah? And the data that is collected is sent directly to the cloud. So nobody in between interferes with the data at all. It's not like you can say, I don't like this data, I'm going to fix it, because it goes directly to a cloud server. Yeah? It is designed for users with low digital literacy, in fact, with low literacy. Okay? Data collection is decentralized. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, how do we give data back to the community? This is where we worked very closely in the process of co-production. I worked with Cassandra Shia, Netra Palaniswamy. Cassandra Shia was from the MIT Media Lab. She was our fancy outside person, but the rest of it was done by us, by Puduvalva, by Netra, by myself, and the community. So this is, you see this village map. Yeah? Now I'm just going to, you can see a banana tree there, that's diet. Yeah? You see the flower bed there, that is marriage and family. You see those asset box, you see a cow, you see a house, you see a fridge. So what you're seeing here is the map of the entire village on each of the indicators that are in the survey. There is a color-coded mechanism. You can see that some of the dots below the figure is very, very dark, and then they go to a bright green. As those dots get greener and greener, that aspect of their lives in that village is better and better. So immediately, you can be completely illiterate, look at the color and say, oh, and compare yourself to the next village. Our village is doing well, they're not doing well in the other thing. Yeah? Immediately, they're able to see what's going on. Intra-household bargaining. Very simple, what we call a phase forces diagram. All the data is fed into faces of women, faces of men, and faces of the father and the mother-in-law. Okay? So there are three actors in this box. The bigger their faces, the more power that person has on that particular issue. Now, this is an interesting story of co-production. Cassandra is of Chinese origin. She's Chinese-American. She's drawing these pictures by hand. We took them to the community, and they said, Chinese this person looks like a Chinese person. They don't look like us. Put a bindi on the woman, give the man a mustache, give them a longer hair. What is all this? So we had to work with local artists to draw it so it looked like they were some people they could identify. That's what we ended up with. That's a very Tamilian-looking man, if you don't know Tamil now. Okay? So comparing, they always wanted to compare their village to the neighboring village. So that's what we've done here. An example, let's take the third example. Who makes the decision regarding the number of children? You see in the village of Agamalai, the woman's face is much bigger. The village of Malakurti Dasai, the men's face is much bigger. Similarly, in the next slide. So immediately you can say, our village is doing better than that village on this aspect, but not in the other. Assets. Again, a very simple color-coded diagram. You can also see that Agamalai compared to the next village, Agamalai is much blacker than the other village. The other village is much greener. Immediately you can see that village is doing better on asset accumulation. So you see pictures of a house, a fridge, a TV set, and so on. Every time a goat, and this, by the way, is each individual household. Every time that household has a red box around the picture, they have lost the asset. If they have a green box around the picture, they have gained the asset over the last year. If there is no box, they have had the asset over the last year. Okay? You can immediately see which village is doing better. I don't have to explain that to you. Okay? So immediate recognition of data and using it to analyze your own conditions. Marriage and family. I told you that in this we were looking at Theni. It was a census of one district, Theni district in Tamil Nadu, which is a very tribal district. There's a lot of inter-relative marriage, and the project and the women participants in the project didn't like this. So they said, okay, we developed this different way. If you know statistics, it's actually a stem and leaf diagram. But what we did with it, the taller the leaf, the flower, that's your age at marriage, the height of the flower. Okay? The number of leaves in the flower are number of kids. Okay? If the flower is red, you married a relative. If the flower is yellow, you married somebody who's not a relative. Relative meaning uncle, niece marriages, cousin marriage. If the flower is still a bud, your decision wasn't taken into account in finding a husband for you. If the flower is open, your decision was taken into account. Immediately you see which village is better. Again, you see the color-coded thing at the top. And they'll say, my God, that village is so much better, we have to progress there. And these are, by the way, questions that the community developed for themselves. We were not trying to force anything here. Yeah? We're just visualizing it for them. And finally, diet and nutrition. Again, what you see here is a banana leaf. Yeah? On that banana leaf, you see some rice, you see a brinjal, you see some chicken, and you see a papaya, representing different aspects of food. Yeah? You can immediately see that the right-hand side village is doing better on food consumption, or on every aspect. And you see a blank banana leaf down there on the left. Why? That's the answer to the question, did the person who feeds the family ever go hungry? If the answer is yes, you get a blank banana leaf. We did an RCT on this in the second year. We did this in 2013 and 15. By 2015, all those blank banana leaves had disappeared. They immediately took action on that. Okay? So I'm just giving you a glimpse of this. There are videos, all the data is up online. Go to our website, you'll see all of it. The important thing is how do you feed this data back? We did it in two places, in the VO meeting and in the Gram Sabha. Yeah? We showed these pictures. We did these big charts, posters about the village scene. We showed the visualizations in an interactive meeting. And it had, quite a tremendous impact. Oh, I should also say that we are looking for funding to do this in other parts of India. So funders here, please listen to that. The bank doesn't give us funding for this anymore. Now, I keep hitting on the bank because nobody in the bank has any money to do interesting work. Okay, so what is interesting about this data is that it's not just for the community. I'm now showing you for that district, pulling out that data. I have a lot of time. Okay, okay. Are you sure that's right? Because there's also Q&A. Okay, fine, all right. So one of the interesting things here is that data can be used by higher levels of government. In fact, why the Tamil Nadu government, Mr. S. Krishnan, who was then the planning secretary, was very interested in doing this for the whole state, is that because he could get data for the entire state on a census basis. Censuses in our country are done every 10 years, 2001, 2011, 2021. This is a census done once a year because you've decentralized the census data collecting process. And the government can use the data to track. So we're looking at nutrition data here. We're giving you block level averages and district level averages in 2014, 2015. Yeah, 14 and 15 were the 2 years. Yeah. And you can see track change. You can track which block is doing different from the other. And not just that, you can also do it at the village level. Now, this is not for the community. This is for the government. But they get all this data. Nobody's hiding the data. It's public data. Now, there are various caveats for this that I'm happy to discuss. One caveat as you take this forward, I request Jivaka to listen to this because I want to do it with you, okay? I want to come back and do this with you. So when I proposed it to Arvind, I think 5 years ago, he said, no, we're not ready for this yet, but I think you're ready now, so think about it. You get this data now at the village level. You can track change over time for every village, and the communities are tracking themselves. A few caveats. We decided as a design principle not to make data available at the individual level, but only at the village level. Why? Because if you give it at the individual level, then all the individuals will start gaming the system, as you know with the BPL surveys. When you know you're going to benefit, if you downplay your assets, you're going to lie. Yeah? So to avoid that problem, we don't give the data at the household level, and also because they are talking about things like domestic violence and so on, we don't want them to be targeted for that. Okay? The second thing to keep in mind is it is very, very important to pay attention to who collects the data in the village. If you have a good SHG network, that SHG network is the idea. In Indonesia, they don't have a good SHG network. So I'm having trouble there finding who's going to collect the data. That is not a problem in India because of the marvelous work of NRLM. You have these SHG networks everywhere. This is the livelihood for the data collection people. Yeah? Didis are doing it. And they need training and so on, like we do so much of. I think there is tremendous potential with this. Again, Hungarian Douche in the block and district level. The point is that, and by the way, what I'm doing in Indonesia and in Karnataka is now not just doing this household level census, but doing village mapping. Old-fashioned PRA-style transect mapping, we're digitizing. So what you do with that is you take Google Maps, you have the map of the village. On that map of the village, you start assessing the quality of different public goods, the road, the clinic, the school, everything else. The community gives feedback, report cards on how it's doing. That is all colorized on the map. So the map then gives you a picture of the entire village of how things are going on public good allocation, NREG allocation, on the Finance Commission allocations, how this money being spent. And when you watch that, you can see over time how to make better decisions in the Gram Sabha. It's really very, very useful for the panchayat system, for panchayat level decision making. Yeah? But the main thing with this is that it provides citizens, beneficiaries, poor people, with an alternate narrative of poverty. When the NSS says you're doing better, they will tell you, no, our own data is telling you we're doing worse. When there is a mismatch in beneficiary selection, somebody gets a ration card, somebody doesn't, they will say, no, look, our community-based understanding of ration, of who is poor is different from yours. That corrects a lot. We know there's a lot of misallocation in who gets the BPL card and not. That is fixed by the system. There are tremendous gains from this, and this is just one example. It all has to be tailored to the needs of that particular state, that particular project, and so on and so forth. Yeah? Now, all of this is on our website, the socialobservatory.worldbank.org. As I said, there's an RCT, the randomized control trial of Jivaka. There is a paper in Karnataka on looking at a citizen empowerment evaluation. That's a mixed methods evaluation. There's a wonderful thing done by Paul Christian evaluating a food security intervention with Jivaka. We also developed monitoring systems, nutrition-based monitoring systems. All of this is now a little old because I've not been doing this for a few years. We've not been doing this for a few years. But I think there's still some ideas. But the point is that the Social Observatory is not a lab. We are not there doing scientific analysis to tell you how to do your work. We're observing and engaging in dialogue with the project and with citizens to make both our work better. Yeah? And I can assure you as a researcher, it has tremendous gains for the researcher as well. There's a lot of understanding that we get from that process. Yeah? This is not about judgment. This is about collaboration and dialogue, and bottom-up collaboration and dialogue. How do we bring those principles into research? Yeah? One of the things that I've been quite heartful to me in the first session yesterday was everybody was talking this kind of language. But I'm sorry to say that as we went along with our other sessions, I find that the lessons of the Social Observatory have not really been absorbed. Yeah? You have evaluations taking place. Those evaluations are not really in dialogue with communities. They're just doing their surveys and the old-fashioned evaluation. Not necessary, by the way, necessary to do, but it's not an integrated system. Yeah? That really, I would encourage you to think about a model like this. I cannot do this anymore. I'm doing other things. But anybody else can do this. This is not rocket science, really. It's not, it's something brilliant that we did. So the point of all of this is that this is slow development. Our political imperatives make politicians want things, results yesterday. It's not, we can't make that happen. We can have slow, progressive change by listening, by having a dialogic process. That capacity to listen has to be inculcated in researchers. First, inculcated in project staff. Second, and inculcated within communities. Third, we Indians love to talk. We do not like to listen. Yeah? We have to change that. If this is going to be, and secondly, this hierarchy between disciplines. The economists are superior to sociologists, are superior to, God knows, anthropologists are superior to somebody else. It's the most ridiculous trope that exists in the way we function. Just because there's a Nobel, by the way, it's not a Nobel Prize in economics, it's the Swedish Bank Memorial Prize in economics. Keep that in mind. Yeah? That doesn't mean that we should be not treating various social science disciplines on par. Computer scientists, we had collaboration between computer science, economics, sociology, anthropology, political science, psychology, all coming together within one integrated team. That's what we need to do. All of us have something to contribute. We have to put it together. And thirdly, I understand young researchers need to move on in the world, but if you are driven in your research, I will not do this evaluation because I can't get it published. I will not do this evaluation because nobody will, I can't get a job. Very important things. But these are not your project priorities, bhaiya, madam. These are not your project priorities. You shouldn't care about what young researchers need to do or not to do, or even older researchers like me. The priority should not be publication in a top 5 journal to make your reputation. The priority is to give projects feedback, to do their work together. So I would suggest that if you cannot work with outside researchers, develop your own. We have great universities here. Hire people from, Delhi School or JNU or Ashoka or many, many great universities we have in this country, APU in Bangalore, and bring them into your teams and work with them. Don't delegate it necessarily to a consulting firm. That's the second best option. Have your own teams. Spend the time. You have, big project budgets for M&E, spend it well. I should tell you, the Social Observatory, for every $1 we got from some donor, we generated $3 from the project M&E budget. So all we did was to spend the project M&E budget better. That was our main goal. Yeah? There's plenty of money. That's not the problem. The problem is how that money is spent. Fourth point, the idea of well-being, the idea of the good life, the idea of progress should not be defined by us. Who are we? Because Amartya Sen says this is how you should define well-being, we should think of that alone? I'm sorry, I love Amartya Sen, but this is really this idea of poverty measurement that all my colleagues do so wonderfully at the bank. In fact, I sit in that poverty group of the bank that develops all these poverty measures. I think we need to get away from this. Give citizens the ability to define well-being the way they want to define it. Give them those tools. Listen, again, the idea of listening. So we need to move in that direction. We're trying to do some work on that basis. But projects, this is all, I'm not saying anything here that people in the livelihood space don't think and don't believe. Just do it. When you come and listen to people like me with fancy PhDs and fancy jobs telling you this is how you measure poverty, you should just tell them respectfully, please go away. You listen to how we define poverty. You develop your measures to help us look at that better. Don't tell us that it's only a consumption-based measure, just because that's the way the whole world does it. That $1 a day is one aspect. What about aspirations? What about feeling empowered in different ways? What that idea of how do you measure an empowerment? As I said, as somebody who developed those empowered measures, we do it very badly. The measures I developed are terrible. This business of do you make decisions on this or do you make decisions on that? I was part of a gang that developed that in 95, whatever it was. Those are very inadequate measures. We can be far more sophisticated with the tools we have to do this better. I say Beena ji is sitting there. I shouldn't be saying that. But she's done a lot of that work as well, Beena Agarwal. So please redefine, listen better, give communities the ability to define that agenda for themselves, but give them better and better tools as we go along. I saw some wonderful kiosks out there of great work being done that will facilitate with technology the ability to communities to do better work. Please use them, direct them in a better way. Yeah? Okay. Really, the bottom line with all of this is to put people like me, as I said, out of business. Please do not give so much credence to researchers in how you make your decisions. I'm talking here to the project implementers and project staff, know much more than we do. We have to learn from you. We have a set of tools that we can give you to help you think better, work better. But you know more than we do. That should be and the citizens know, and the beneficiaries know more than you do. Reverse the whole bloody hierarchy. Yeah? That's the way we need to progress. This is what I call reflexive or reflective development. It's the way of democratizing how we do research, which is not based on this paternalistic idea of me, the big God will tell you how to fix the world, but letting communities do it for themselves and giving them the tools to do it. Right? Thank you very much.